Hey everyone, it's the Shawn. Welcome to another edition of the Influencer of Tomorrow show. This show is dedicated to you, the business owner, the business leader that wants to build your influence for tomorrow, kick things up to the next level. Today we've got Daren Martin joining us. He's been bringing us lessons about how do we make our companies, how do we make our businesses bastions of influence? How do we get everybody in there being an influencer? How do we build something bigger, right? A lot of times we look at a company, Apple, Steve Jobs is the influencer. Now there are other people in the company. But how do we make a culture where more and more of us can be influencers, where we can get everybody working together and really build something exponential? That's what we're really diving into today with Darren. Really excited for it. So wherever you're at, we want to hear from you. You may be watching us on YouTube, on the Influencer of Tomorrow channel. If you haven't subscribed and rung the bell, do that. You might be watching one of our LinkedIn feeds. You might be picking us up on Facebook. Wherever you're at, comment. Let us know what you're learning. Let us know what challenges you have, what you'd like us to clarify. We'll comment back to you, and if we need to, we'll do a whole new episode to cover some additional content. So we really want to hear from you, the viewer, listener. Let us know what you're seeing. Let us know what you're learning. Let us know how we can help you more. Quick reminder, we don't do investment advice. We don't do legal advice on the show. Everything here is just for your education. We're bringing you new ideas. It's your job to then take those ideas, vet them through your professional advisors, make them happen. So hopefully we'll spurn some new thoughts. Let's jump into it. Darren, how do we make a company where we have influencers and make something bigger than ourselves?
So let me just start by framing up the problem, Shawn, and you know this, but Gallup year after year does the same poll. What's the average engagement rate at a typical U.S. company? Is 29%, okay? And what that means, and actually it's worse globally. If you take global companies, it's 15%.
Wow.
So what that basically means is you've got a lot of people that are just along for the ride, and think how much companies are leaving on the table by not having everybody, involved, bringing ideas. Henry Ford said years ago, "Why, when I ask for a pair of hands, do I need a brain?" Sorry, they evidently have construction going on. There's a curveball.
Joys of modern living, right?
Yeah. So Ford said, "Why, when I ask for a pair of hands, do I get a brain?" And he was obviously looking for an automated workforce. But that's very different from today's automotive world, where Toyota gets on average 40 ideas every year from every employee. And the best companies are ones where you have a lot of influencers, right? Not a lot of authoritarians, but a lot of influencers. Big difference.
Yes, exactly. So we want to get to that, right? I mean, that's kind of a goal for us, is to move our company culture where everybody feels like they can participate. But for a lot of companies, that's not been the way it's been, right? I mean, it's always been top down. People aren't encouraged to speak up as much. So what do we do to start transforming the culture, or to make sure that we're maximizing the culture, even if we've taken some steps that direction?
Yeah. So, and not only are they not encouraged to speak up, sometimes they're slapped down for speaking up or for their ideas. And I was at a company recently doing some culture work, and I talked to one of the guys about a particular setup that didn't seem very efficient to me, or like it was really attracting and drawing customers. And I said, "Well, what's your opinion on this?" And he says, "Well, nobody's asked me, but if they did, I would say." And I thought, wow,
Right.
he knew exactly what to do to fix this situation, but they weren't really tapping into that. And so I think it starts by, asking, listening. People will tell you amazing things if you just ask them. And, it's the old Covey, seek first to understand and then to be understood. A lot of leaders are so busy trying to push their agenda and explain it, instead of really trying to understand what it's like to be, at this particular part of the company, or running sales, or doing this other thing, or being in the warehouse. When they go out there and actually start asking questions and listening, some pretty amazing stuff starts to happen.
Exactly. And I think, that's one of the biggest challenges, is just making it comfortable for people, right? A lot of companies, people are scared to speak up because we have this traditional top-down culture, and it's, somebody higher up probably set the structure up, and if I say something bad about how it's working, they might get mad at me. And I've seen that happen in companies, right?
Yeah, it starts with trust, obviously, is the foundational piece. If you want people to be open, if you want people to share. I remember talking to a guy at a company, and he had some great ideas, or had some solutions. And I said, "Well, man, you need to share those ideas." And he said, "No, I shut my idea mill off many, many years ago." And I said, "Why?" And he said, "Because nobody was listening." And I said, well, you may want to turn it back on, right? But that's what you run into in oppressive sort of cultures. I think the bigger deal, I mean, those are very clear when you got leaders that are just shutting people down and just, toxic kind of environments.
Yep.
But I think the bigger norm is that it's just a lack of communication within the company, where there's not really that vehicle, or there's not that process. Everybody's running so fast and furious, and nobody's slowing down really enough to say, hey, what could we do better? Yeah. What would it look like if we, hey, let's reinvent our company from ground up. What would we look like if we were to do that?
Yeah, well, you've got to have the mechanism to have those conversations, right? I mean, I think that's one of the bigger problems too. So, maybe not everybody's in a toxic situation, but a lot of situations, people feel like, I've got so much on my desk, I've just got to get it done. And, will my boss or my higher ups get mad if I start throwing ideas out there? You need some mechanism to vet these things and turn them into conversations, right there.
Yeah, it's the proverbial rat race where people are just running fast and furious. And the problem with that is that we never get about the business of reinventing our business. We never think, I was telling a company recently, I said, the problem is y'all don't have enough lazy people. I said, you need more lazy people. Lazy people figure out shortcuts. They figure out, we've had luggage for 5,000 years. It wasn't until the 70s that somebody figured out we could put wheels on it, right? I remember those days as, just schlepping through the airport with all the, my parents and all us kids, and you had to get somebody to help with it and all that stuff. And finally one day, after thousands of years of luggage, somebody said, well, why don't we just stick wheels on these suckers? And now you wouldn't dream of buying a big piece of luggage without some wheels on it. Right. So amazing things happen when people start to think and have that invitation, what would we do different?
Yeah, and questioning processes, right? I mean, that's a big part of businesses. We spend a lot of time on our processes. We have to go back and question them. George, looks like you're ready to jump in here.
Yeah, I love that whole concept of think. That was the sign that the founder of IBM had plastered throughout the halls in the old days of Big Blue. Getting people to think. And what that really means is think differently. If everybody's saying the same thing, then somebody's not thinking. So bottom line. But I have to go back, Darren. Tell us a little bit about your early beginnings into what you're currently doing and how you got started in the work that you're currently doing, because you are an influencer and you're influencing a lot of people, but someone or something or both influenced you to do what you're doing today.
Love it. So I was born at a very early age. I'm sorry.
That's an old one.
that's that old Steve Martin line. Never gets old. But, so George, I ran my own business for 20 years, did a lot of things wrong. And, much of what I teach today, I learned by not doing some of those things. It was that typical lonely at the top. Hey, I'm the only one that seems to be passionate and rowing, and having to try to drag everybody else along. And about 10, 12 years ago, I sold that business, went through a life change, and launched out on my own and joined a little boutique consulting firm. And I started going into other people's companies. And it's amazing what you see when it's not yours, right? Yeah. When it's the old fish discover water last. And you can see things that is not visible when you've been living in that environment.
Right.
And I started seeing the good, the bad, and the ugly. And ultimately, I saw patterns, and I started writing about those patterns. And that birthed one of my books, but the big one, A Company of Owners. How do you create a company where everybody acts like an owner? And it's really about, I love the title for today's deal. It's Company of Influencers, because that's ultimately what it's really about.
Yeah.
I've done some work at all sorts of companies, all kinds of industries, because when you're talking about the people side of business, it's really neutral when it comes to industry or the type of, what people are doing. And what I've discovered is there's a big, big difference between authority and influence. You can have a lot of authority and zero influence.
True.
I was at a place one time, and somebody told me about one of the senior leaders. Excuse my language on this, but this is what they said. They said, Darren, it was a plant. And they said, Darren, there isn't a person out here that would do a damn thing for that guy. I thought, wow, he's got all the credentials in the world. He's got all the authority. He can, but nobody would follow him. They wouldn't. And so I've really been fascinated with this. How do we focus more on influence than we do just on, name tag on a door kind of thing?
That's the proverbial post-turtle syndrome. You know about that being in Texas, don't you?
No, sir. Post-turtle. I like it already.
Yeah. So if you ever see a turtle on top of a fence post, you know it didn't get there by itself.
I love it.
Okay. I thought you being a Texan, you'd really appreciate that.
I was thinking it's turtles all the way down, but that's another whole conversation. I have heard that, but I forgot it. And George, learning is remembering. So thank you for reminding me about the turtle.
My pleasure. My pleasure.
Well, that brings up, as a comical point that learning is reminding, that brings up an interesting point. I watched a speaker speak recently, and they said, I'm in the reminder business, which really brings back a big part of being an influencer. Part of what you just talked about of being a consultant, and I see this too, you go inside something, and because you're not connected to it, because you're not there every day, you have this outside perspective, and you can say, man, why didn't you do this? Or why isn't this here? Or everybody else is doing that. So there's a lot to be said about that cross-pollination right there. And I mean, to bring in fresh ideas. You have employees that have been in different industries, they've had different life experiences, they've worked at different companies. If we're not letting people speak up, we're not getting that cross-pollination. We're not bringing in those ideas from other places that could fuel big change in our company.
Yeah, so I'm a peg myself as an old guy here, but the show Who Wants to Be a Millionaire, the absolute, almost without fail, best lifeline was poll the audience, right? Because when you get an aggregate of people, I love the Japanese proverb, none of us is as smart as all of us. Yeah. And just that idea that when, if you want to have a great idea, have lots of ideas. And the best way to have lots of ideas is to have lots of people chiming in. Right. So that, you get this, because if you got 20 people in the room, there are 20 points of view. There are 20 backgrounds and experiences. There may be some similarities, but they are truly like snowflakes. They're all unique. Nobody had the same exact upbringing. Nobody had the same exact experiences. And unfortunately, organizations, a lot of time, as I say, if you look around the boardroom and everybody looks and acts just like you, to your point earlier, George, then, what are you thinking? You're not going to survive into the future.
Yeah, well, your customer base doesn't look exactly like you, right? I mean, you've got different people buying your products, right? And you've got different points of view. But, what I've seen in a lot of companies, and until they get intentional about this, is, you'll have a meeting, go, we got 20 people in the room, we should have 20 ideas, and then one person, usually a senior person, is conducting the meeting. They float an idea, and then everybody says, that. Mm-hmm. And so you're not really innovating, or you're not building influence if everybody's agreeing with everybody. If everybody's on the same page, that's a warning sign. Which
is the worst thing a leader can do in a meeting, by the way, is put their point of view out there first.
That's right.
Because when I say, hey, I think we should do X, Y, Z, but I want to get everybody's input, guess what? I'll just shut down the entire room. Right, exactly. Unless we have a really robust and have built an environment. But it's much better to start off and say, hey, we got some options here. What do you guys think? What do what do y'all think? Yeah. Where should we go with this? And start to get those ideas and let that stuff breathe.
Yeah.
And you're going to get much more input. And especially if this is more of a tactical point, but if you get very specific. Shawn, we've been talking about this. We haven't heard from you. Where do you see this thing getting derailed? What is one thing that we haven't talked about that could really there's a way to ask very purposeful questions that really draw that information out of people.
Yeah.
And it's much better than, hey, anybody else have anything to say? Anybody have any ideas?
Right.
If you want input, you really have to build a culture of input that rewards it, no matter what it is.
Exactly, and as a company, it's very tricky, right? Because you're trying to get all the ideas collected together. You're still trying to be efficient, right? Everybody complains about being in meetings where you have to listen to 20 people say the same thing. So you've got to make sure you're doing it in a productive way. But if you're building influence and you're really going to try to go out there and change the marketplace, you've got to come up with something innovative, different, something meaningful.
Yeah, and something anticipatory. There are actually some great tools out there. It's not a plug. I haven't used them in a while, but I used to use a tool called Poll Everywhere. And you could have a room full of people and they could anonymously chime in on, when something came up, hey, which of these 4 paths do you think we should do? And you could just tell people we're locked down and we're hesitant. Well, bam, when they're doing it on their phone, nobody can tell what they typed in. And all of a sudden, the truth comes out. So there's certainly methodologies that people can use. But the best thing to do is really build that culture where people feel the trust, the freedom, the invitation to give their input. And what we need more than anything in 2019, moving into the future, is people that are truly seeing the future. I mean, the world as we know it is over from a work standpoint. Everything is changing. Everything is being disrupted.
Yes.
And not to wear out an old quote, but I love the Gretzky, I was so successful because I didn't skate to where the puck was. I skated to where it was going to be.
Right.
And that's what we need is influencers who are saying, hey, I'm looking at the tea leaves and I think in 5 years, 10 years, this is a true risk to us.
Yes.
I unfortunately don't see a lot of that. I see a lot of people business as usual. Oh, that'll never happen.
Yeah. You and I are speaking the same language completely. It's something I rail about in my Future Done Right show. And it's actually coming into one of my upcoming books is, we've got to build organizations for the future. We used to get away with building organizations for now. People used to see a market need and they build an organization for it now. That doesn't work anymore. You've got to build an organization for where the market's going to be in 5 or 10 years.
And the largest differentiator for the individuals, for the people listening, leaders, individual contributors, is this idea of influence. Because skills, and particularly replicable skills that a computer can do, those are going to be at a lower and lower premium just because it's going to be outsourced.
Absolutely.
So your ability to impact people, to influence, to lead a team, I love, it's in my book, Whiteboard, the Genghis Khan quote. Actually, Dan Carlin from Hardcore History calls him Genghis Khan. So if Dan Carlin calls him Genghis Khan, it's probably Genghis Khan. But he says an army of donkeys led by a lion will defeat an army of lions led by a donkey. And that's leadership influence 101, right?
There you go.
And I'm wearing my lion jacket today.
I love it, man. You got to work.
I went to my closet. I tried to pull out the most.
What do I got? What do I got?
Audacious thing I could do, and it's not even. I don't know. It's not even.
You don't hold a candle to Shawn.
Yeah,
I got a flamingo over here, man.
I'm like uber conservative. I feel like I'm running a financial services firm or something. Very conservative. Yeah.
So I have to capture something right here. I look at the three of us, all three of us, even though we're from different generations. Darren, you and I are baby boomers. Shawn is a follow-up Gen Xer. But we've all been in various corporations, companies, and we all broke free. We all broke free from that. We all said, enough of the same old, same old, same old. There's a better way. And that's what we're doing today. Leading, I think, the charge into the deeper end of the 21st century by helping people recognize everybody has a voice. Everybody can influence a massive number of people if you look down the road and don't just travel the same road you've been traveling on forever.
I love it, George. It's the biggest shift in the workforce that we've seen. A lot of people going out, starting their own thing. Yep. I do think that I think corporations are in trouble, especially if they're doing business as usual. But I was speaking to a group recently, and I said, look, you don't want an organization. An organization, it comes with bureaucracy and policies and all that. I said, you want an organism. And if more companies would start realizing what they really are, it's an organism. It's these interconnected parts, right?
It has life.
It has life. And its impact, what happens to the hand impacts the foot, right? Or vice versa. You don't drop a brick on your foot and the hand go, oh, well, at least it's not me. But how many times have you heard that in a company where, well, the sales department, blah, 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 they're in trouble, but who cares? Doesn't impact my bonus, right? And we've got to start thinking more about enterprises and organisms instead of just fixed, static, historical organizations.
Yep.
Yeah. Yes. And it's got to be about the change. We've had several examples of companies that didn't change and they became irrelevant, right? So it's, and we all run that risk. You get stable, you get particularly bigger companies that are doing well, and you can get disrupted.
Yeah, it's the old "what got you here won't get you there," and
Yes.
boy, I think it was John Paul Getty who actually said, in many cases, your experience could be your worst enemy.
Yeah.
True.
And we still have companies saying we've been around since 1940, which is all well and good. But what have you done for me lately? How are you as a business surviving in 2019? Not just surviving, but thriving. What are you doing to reinvent yourself?
Well, I want to bring a current example out. I mean, we don't try to make this a political show, but I'm watching a lot of the tech companies right now are going very political, right? It's becoming necessary because we have a potential for breakups of the Googles and the Facebooks. International fines are coming. Right here around recording time, Zuckerberg was subpoenaed to Canada. Apparently, he's going to be in contempt of Parliament because he's not going to show up in Canada. We are moving into a scene where our tech companies are becoming political companies, and this has happened very quickly, right? This has happened over the course of the last maybe 2 to 3 years. Their business is changing, and I'm now looking at whether our major tech companies, if their business now is managing politics rather than managing the core technologies. What do you say about industries that shift that fast, Darren? I mean, what do we need to do to be ready for those types of things?
Look, it's just like what happens in a company. If certain voices are shut down, and other voices are given have the only channel, right? Then you're going to end up with a very slanted sort of deal. And we know, I mean, it's a crazy world we live in. There are two kinds of people in the world: those who put people in two categories and those that don't. I think that's funny, but we clearly live in a world where there are two categories. I do a thing from stage where I talk about different points of view, and then I have people describe things. Of course, they're facing a different direction, so they see different things. And then I say the description's different. Who's right? And everybody will, of course, say, well, they're both right. And then I'll jokingly say, no one gets a laugh, they can't both be right. This is America, right? Somebody's got to be right. And what's disheartening is when the purveyors of conversations, the Facebooks, the Googles, whoever they are, I don't care whatever side, when they start to funnel and shift and say, no, we're going to let this be heard, but this not. Now, obviously, that doesn't apply to things that, yelling fire in the theater, the old classic example. But yeah, I think we're best when we are listening, and when we're cooperating, when we're learning from each other, and when we're letting a lot of different points of view come to the table. We can all learn something. Yeah,
exactly. But I mean, their core business, I think, has changed now, right? I mean, they are in the business of managing politics as much as they are as building software now.
It's a weird world of responsibility we live in, where anybody can say anything to anywhere around the world, right? This is unprecedented down through history. I grew up overseas. We used to write aerograms, and it would take 3 weeks, to get that message. So yeah, we're trying to figure out how to live in a digital world and a grown-up world, and how to treat each other in ways that bring respect and that really make us all learners.
Yep. So
how'd you get me off on that, Shawn?
No, it's just been on my mind, and I think it's interesting, and I knew you could handle the question, Darren. So, final thoughts, Darren, on just how do we make our companies built to be influencers? When we talk about beyond just being an influencer or one, how do we make companies influencer? What do you think the keys are?
So I think companies that lead the charge on really recognizing that it's no longer that we are, and this is going to sound we are the world, but we're global citizens. There's a lot more responsibility. Shawn, I just invited you to, and George, I would invite you as well. I've got on LinkedIn company culture advocates group, and it's all people that are interested in company culture, passionate about it. And there's a great post on there from one of our members talking about, hey, it's not just about the profits, right, for a company. It's about making a difference. And they reference Tom's and all sorts of companies that are doing more than just making a product, selling a product. And there's no shame in that.
Yeah.
But I really think it's about starting to have a bigger picture for ourselves, what it means to leave the world better than we found it, what it means to build work cultures where people thrive and love it, and they dance in to work on a Monday morning instead of crawling in. We've got a lot of opportunity here, and I'm excited about the future, but we've got a lot of work cut out for us.
Yeah. So, Darren, I know you're a fantastic person to get up and talk to organizations, consult with them, help them. How do people find your body of work? How do they get in touch with you?
So if they will send me a telegram, no, I'm just kidding. After all that, DarenMartin.com. I'm pretty easy to find. So just DAREN Martin.com, and then, website, YouTube, Twitter, LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram, I'm following your lead, Shawn, Mr. McBride. Let's just get it all out there. So, and then my books obviously are on Amazon and other outlets as well. Pretty easy to track down.
Fantastic, folks. Darren, thanks for another great episode. Folks that are watching, pat yourself on the back for building your influence of tomorrow. Think about the big issues with yourself and your company. Make sure you subscribe to the Influencer of Tomorrow YouTube channel. Ring the bell so you get the notifications. Like this video if you enjoyed it. Go check out other videos. Go to influenceroftomorrow.com. See our past guests, see our upcoming guests. Get some freebies from George and I to help build your influence for tomorrow. So, folks, thanks for joining us again. Darren, thanks for being here. Look forward to seeing you again soon.
Yep, absolutely. Thanks, guys.